Good morning, this is Steve here. I am in the process of changing out the timing chain on my 2007 Toyota Prius. I've got 335,000 miles on the car. The car has a code for the crank and the cam position out of sync basically. And if so I looked in the manual, the troubleshooting for that basically says to inspect the timing chain and either replace it if it's out of spec or replace the ECU. Since this car has 330,000 miles on it, I'm assuming it's the timing chain that it's just stretched. So if your car has the code for the crank and cam out of sync, then changing the timing chain might be your solution. So here I'm in the process. What I've done is I've removed the whole cowl along with the windshield wipers. That's pretty easy to remove. I've also removed the airbox. I've pulled the brake reservoir out of the way. Basically, what we're working on right now is we're gonna pull the cylinder head cover off. We're gonna pull this engine mount out of the way and jack the engine up. You turn it to top dead center, remove the tensioner, take the chain off, put the new chain on. Should be pretty straightforward. The cool thing is once we get this engine mount out of the way, there's actually a decent amount of space to work over here. I actually pulled a used chain off of a low mileage Prius in the junkyard that had been smashed right here, and so it was all crunched and it was actually really tough to get to. So I'm actually looking forward to pulling the whole thing apart on this because there's so much more space here. I am following the factory service manual right here, which just lines up step by step how you go through this process. If you're interested in getting that manual, shoot me a message. I can probably help you find it. Okay, so the next step is going to be I'm removing all these connectors for the coil packs and for the fuel injectors right here. And then at that point, we are going to remove all these bolts and pop the cylinder head cover. So removing the crankshaft pulley bolt and the crankshaft pulley in the factory manual calls for using a special tool that bolts into these holes here. One option is to fabricate a tool or find that tool somewhere and use that. A way that I've used for a long time is just some rope wrapped around here, and then I tie it off to someplace directly next to it, and that allows you to tighten and loosen that bolt however you need to. So what I've got going on is it's just I looped, so it's basically girth hitched around here is what you'd I think call it in actual knot terms, but basically I just double the rope over, loop it through itself, and go back around so that it's a self-cinching knot. And that way you could hook it up here, you can hook it anywhere that you've got someplace to hook it to, and that way as you crank on the bolt it will self-tighten. All you do if you're putting it on or taking it off is you switch the direction. So right now I was just actually installing it and torquing it down, so I had it this way. To pull the bolt off, you just flip it around the opposite way. What we've done is we've taken the valve cover off. We have removed the engine mount here along with just a few other peripherals, and then we took off the timing chain cover, which actually houses the oil pump. There's a few parts that are non-reusable in there that I'm gonna have to go see if I can find at the auto parts store. The crankshaft oil seal is one of them, and there's 2 oil pump O-rings that go right in there. I'm also gonna replace the water pump just because I think if I can get it for about 30 or 40 bucks, it's gonna be worth replacing just while I have it off. It doesn't look terrible. It has a little bit of play, but not much. So what I wanted to show you here is on the left is the chain that I pulled off of the low mileage car. On the right is the chain off this car. And you can actually see visibly the stretch in the chains here, which is kind of crazy. I wasn't sure, I was hoping that I'd be able to see it, but you can see there's significant stretch in the old chain. And so, yeah, I just like it when it confirms that I need to be replaced. Okay, here's something that's really cool I just noticed. So I pulled the timing chain tensioner off of the vehicle in the junkyard that I pulled the timing chain off of. It's this one right here. here's the old one off the car, off my car. The really cool thing that you can see here also, another thing to just verify the wear, is look at how far this plunger has been pushed out to tension the timing chain. This is the one, the old one off the worn timing chain, and here's the new one, and you can see how far in that plunger has been living. It's way in there because it hasn't needed to tension the chain as much versus this one. So just some more confirmation, and I'm actually gonna use the tensioner that I pulled off the car in the junkyard, just because it's newer, and why not? Okay, so ran into a big question mark as I was doing this. When I took off the timing chain, I noticed that the variable valve timing sprocket rotated about an inch in either direction. Watched some other videos of different Toyota sprockets that show that the VVT sprocket is supposed to lock in position. So I decided I either need to buy a new one or take mine apart, and might as well take it apart first. So I was going to show you what's going on here. So as you can see, there's a spring here. And in other videos, this right here is a pin. It still is a pin, but in the other videos, this would be pressurized by this plate when it's on there. And when it gets to the most, I don't remember if it's the most advanced or retarded position, either way, it locks into a hole at the bottom, so it's a pin that drops into a hole. Okay, so here's the sprocket, and I'll show you it just rotates freely quite a bit in there, as you can see. It doesn't lock into place. I'm just going to show you the inside now. So if you can see here, right there is where that pin is sliding back and forth, and there's no place for it to drop into. There's no hole that's the size of that pin. My conclusion is that this is not designed the same. So you see that pin right there? There's that pin. And my conclusion is that this VVT is not designed the same as the VVT on Corollas that does have a hole for that pin to lock into. So I would say the hardest part of this job was getting the chain timed and installed correctly. What you can see here is those two orange links in the chain, and there are 3 colored links. I believe there's 2 orange and 1 yellow. And so these 2 that are close together, they get lined up with the timing notches on these pulleys. So on this one, on the exhaust cam sprocket, there is a dot. You want a single dot on top, and you want it to say EX. There's a little EX, it says EX on the side of it, on the side of the exhaust camshaft, pointing towards the middle here. And then on this one, there is a line. There's lines, several lines that go across this. And there's a line here, and then there's a dot right down here. So you want the dot and the line up on top, and then you line that up with the center of the link here, center of the link here. What threw me off is on the crankshaft pulley down below, there's a whole bunch of marks, and in the manual it doesn't really explain very well how to line that one up. There's a small gear, or a small circle on the pulley that has some timing marks on it, and then farther back there's a larger gear that has more marks on it. It's got like a dot and 2 dots. This link is supposed to line up with the dot on the small ring that's closest to the chain. That's where I actually messed up the first time. So the process for timing this engine is, before you take the old chain off, you set the engine to top dead center, and then to verify, you would look down here, make sure that on number 1 cylinder, both of your cam lobes are pointed up, or at least not pressing down on the valves on your exhaust and your intake, and that will tell you that you're on your compression stroke. The manual walks through these kind of crazy steps, and I don't think you have to follow all the steps that they have in there. It was really confusing. And I tried to find any info online to figure out how to do it, but basically you would probably even have it easier if you just keep rotating your engine until all of these line up on the old chain as well, and then you just know for sure. You take it off exactly how it looks and then put it back on again. And from what I was reading, these links only line up with the timing marks every so many rotations, but I think personally, from my experience with how confusing this was and like how worrisome that I might crush my engine if I hook it together wrong because it's an interference engine, I think it'd be worth it to, before you pull your old chain off, turn your engine over and over and over until you get it to where these links line up with the timing marks on top of here and down on the crankshaft pulley. Then pull it off, put your new one back on exactly how this old one was, and you'll be good to go.